the Patriots, for example, they don't use guys and what they can't do. They focus on what they can do. And you look at Julian Edelman's route tree numbers, there's 3 routes that he's running. It's just you can't really stop it, and you're just going to line him a certain way. And people will see on these charts that they'll be red in certain areas. And obviously, just so people know, it doesn't mean that they suck. It's just that, hey, they're not being used this certain way, or they're just not in the good system or not lining up in the right spot. So my question is, as a sicko, and for everybody out there, when they see these reception perception models like Kadarius Toney, that's all red, but we won't get into that. What necessarily goes into, I guess, the redness of it, or you look at, I guess, what does it really mean?
Yeah, so if basically all the charts are color coded, and pretty simple: red, green, yellow. For the route success rate chart, if a route is red, that means it is below the NFL or college prospect average. On the route percentage chart, it means that he ran that at a below average rate. So that's why I try. Well, now that I'm behind a paywall, I'm probably being a little stingier about what I am and am not tweeting out. I struggle with the balance with that, right? And that's just something I would admit to you guys, which is, and to everybody listening and watching, is tough. I want to share as much of this information as possible, but also I want to get paid for this too. So it is a balance. But I think when I tweet these charts out, I try to keep them together. For example, I posted CD Lamb the other day, and I was trying to kind of make the point that I think he could be used in more ways than just one. Used in more than just the way he was used as an interior receiver last year. And I think it's important to look at the route success rate charts and the route percentage chart in conjunction, which is why they're right next to each other on the RP site on the player profile page. Because yeah, sure, if he has 100% success rate on the corner route or something, but he only ran it 1% of the time, who really cares? And I think there's other times when they run it at a really high rate and they have the really high success rate, those things go together. So a lot of what I'm trying to do with reception perception is try to put these guys into types. Like you mentioned, who are these number 1 alpha X receivers? Who's a really solid number 2 flanker? For example, a guy like Marvin Jones obviously has had a ton of success in his career. He's put up a ton of production. He's a very underrated player in general. He's never been more than a 50, 60th percentile success rate versus man coverage player at the very best. And at first people are 40th, 50th, 60th percentile. That's probably not very good. Well, number one, we're mostly working with guys that there is a bit of a selection bias here, right? Because I'm not sitting there charting, Tajay Sharp or something like that, right? I don't have that kind of manpower here. Maybe someday, but add a few more hours of the day. But yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing too, is you're kind of just trying to type guys out. And, a player like Marvin Jones who consistently produces and is at that level in reception perception, that doesn't mean that he's bad or anything like that, but that's sort of the classic number 2 receiver mold. They're going to fall in that grouping. And I think that's what's so cool about being able to look at the historical data as a sicko subscriber. You can look at through RP history and see, okay, well, this is where Corey Davis scores. That's pretty similar to, most of these longtime number 2 receivers, which is what I think Corey Davis is, for example.
I'm just another follow-up question here is the New England Patriots are the team that I mentioned where they use guys in the ways that they're great. Do you kind of see, have you tracked it or even looked at it where a player like, Kendrick Bourne, who wins on slants, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, pretty heavily, or a guy like Nelson Agholor, do you see that their percentage of routes goes to what they do well, considering now that they're in a system where they line up guys specifically for specific roles?
Nelson Agholor is a really fascinating example, and this is where I think if you're I keep mentioning the tiers, but I'm sorry, but Prime tier subscriber, Sicko tier subscriber for receptionperception.com, you can get access to not just the most recent season, but the profile from a previous charted season. And with Agholor, I hadn't looked at him since 2017 because he hasn't done anything since 2017 prior to last year. So his linked profile back on his current page really shows the difference between his route charts from Philly when they used him as a pop gun slot receiver versus what they had him do in Vegas last year, which was mostly run a bunch of vertical routes. So I think he's a fascinating player for them because I think sure, he could probably fit into that sort of slant slot receiver mold, but I think it fits best as more of a vertical threat. So I really have no idea how they're going to use him as a player, but I think his best work came as a vertical player last year with the Raiders.